And our third question is, what are the obstacles that continue to hinder the African startup space, and what can investors, accelerators, and funders do to overcome them? So, Parminder, I want to start with you. Of course, you know I was going to start with you. So, as the former CEO of the Tony Luminu Foundation, you've talked to me about how different the ecosystem was around a decade ago. So very interested to maybe hear about the obstacles that you saw maybe overcame and some of the obstacles that you see right now.
Well, then I didn't see any obstacles. I was a private sector leader, Tony Aluminum, who said, I want to commit $100 million of my family wealth to supporting African entrepreneurs. Will you help me design or operationalize my vision? And so it was a blank sheet of paper, but for me, it was like I had the option. One was really, what I could do? This is very easy. I can just parachute, research a few of the Western models, take one and parachute it into the African continent. But as a filmmaker, I've never done that. I've never gone and made a film in Africa, Asia, or Latin America and taken an entirely Western crew and a director and brought back a story from the outside. For me, the story had to be always told from the inside. So it was really the challenge I set myself was how do I design something which is made in Africa by Africans for Africans, yeah? And part of that for me was about understanding the ecosystem. Yeah. And it was, then the ecosystem existed, but it was quite incoherent. It was quite fragmented, yeah? Across every country, there was some form of an accelerator program, right? The 54 countries. But it was actually, for me, is being a filmmaker again and saying, how do we, having a bigger vision, I could have designed the program and say, let's start a pilot with Nigeria first, right? And see if it works, and then we can roll it, maybe West Africa, East Africa. So I said, no, I think we should do the entire African continent, Pan-African program, bottom of the pyramid, 0 to 3-year-old businesses. From your idea can transform Africa, right? So it was literally, it was democratizing luck and institutionalizing opportunity. It was opportunity and luck, right? And if we can, Tony Lumulu always talked about how, he owed everything that what made him was, having access to really good mentors, yeah? So anyway, so designing, but now 10 years on, so that program was, as he said, was a visionary philanthropist, an African philanthropist. I think if a Western philanthropist foundation had said, Parminder Vir OBE Africa, design a program, I would not have gone. If an African government had said to me, come and help us design an entrepreneurship program, I would not have gone, knowing the obstacles. Okay. But because it was a private sector leader, and I knew I only had 20 steps between my office and his office when I finished the first year of the program, to say, okay, now we need to move $5 million into the bank accounts of 1,000 entrepreneurs. And that for me became a real test, like how quickly can we move that? And I was blown away by the speed at which, we fulfill that promise. But I think 10 years on, the ecosystem has evolved. I think the high net worths, the angel investors across the African continent and that network, I think the VC and private equity has really matured across the continent. I think the governments across the continent, 54, have seen the value of entrepreneurship and the importance of entrepreneurship. I think the academic institutions, for me, that was a fundamental plank of the entrepreneurship program, have really adopted entrepreneurship as a teachable subject, yeah? So the ecosystem, and then of course we had the pouring in of a lot of FDI and a lot of foreign investment in some of the high growth companies, yeah? So I feel now the ecosystem is very strong, very mature, yeah? But for me, it's important that the ecosystem is a movement, is seen as a coherent whole. In the way that we thought the Africa Trade Agreement was attempting to bring 54 countries together in terms of trade. Yeah. I mean, so for me, really, and it should speak with a single voice, a voice or voices, really in terms of the country, in terms of the new scrambles. I believe that the next innovations and funding and money and models of business models have to come from the global south. And the African SMEs, never mind the government, have to be positioned to be able to really sit at the table on an equal basis.
No, interesting. Especially what you said about the African Free Continental Trade Area. I'm maybe interested to get your take on the progress that's been made there in terms of maybe removing some of the regulation, licenses, even tariffs in the future. Do you think it's helping to overcome some of those obstacles or hindrances that startups and companies that are trading across the continent are facing?
Should ask Dango to that question. Sorry, Bernard.
Well, let's take a step back from that. Before we go to that, to the African Trade Agreement, let's even look at internal regulation. And one of the things that I feel, particularly from the Nigerian or West African perspective, is local investors are not being incentivized enough. Now, in two ways, let me look at it from the point of view of tax breaks. What exactly you want? Now, if I'm a Nigerian and I invest, well, if my money isn't really kosher per se, and I invest in Nigeria, what I've done is I've told you, the tax officer, that I have this amount of money in my corpus. And so what then happens is that you choose me to get a piece of that. And even if I got my money legally, I still don't want to be taxed on that per se. And so what I feel is there has to be a bit of give and take. If there are laws around investing in some of these programs whereby the government says it's actually returns on tax free, for example, what you're going to do is, because I've had conversations like this, the numbers of individuals want to see if they can bring their money back home, but they're afraid about what will happen. Where the government is able to give guarantees that, okay, we know that you might have been naughty in getting this money. We forgive you if you bring the money home. We do not tax you if you bring the money home. What you're going to see is more people are going to bring the money back home. And then the second thing is legal, in terms of what legal frameworks are there. What we see is that the legal frameworks are there to extract and not to actually support. And beyond that, what legal frameworks guide founders? So what you see is founders are going to invest or set up in Mauritius. They're setting up in America. What they're backing on is the fact that if they commit any wrongdoings in Africa, there's a bit of a legal black box, which is why a number of people who have invested in when these companies go bust, they're unable to take legal action. A lot of people shy away from that because it becomes more expensive. They'll just rather not do business with that founder or those set of people again. But they do not really take the steps in order to make someone a scapegoat. And I only know of one person who I wouldn't mention right now, who has gone with his fund to actually prosecute a bad faith founder. But there has to be more of this coming up so that people get the idea that it's not business as usual. You have to be able to deliver. I mean, you're not going to be paying your nanny $60,000 a year. There's actually a founder that does that, and it came out in newspaper. These are things whereby they have to be well-documented ways of doing business. And so far, what the governments of Africa are interested in doing is extracting while leaving the rest of the mess for the private sector to handle, which doesn't build fit. You are not going to have, in a low-trust environment, people are not going to give you money.
No, interesting. And I think one thing you touched on, and I think it could lead to, is sometimes a talent drain or a drain in terms of some of our best workers or best companies. We've seen a lot of these startups grow, and then they move their headquarters to the West. You've seen it with Flutterwave, I believe Money Point as well. So I just want to ask, is that maybe a concern to you, or is that an obstacle in terms of other startups growing and not being able to take advantage of the success of these other startups that have moved towards other continents into the West?
There's a reason for the movement. So first off, before I even go straight to the point you've made, this topic is so broad. We could spend 10 hours talking about this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to stay within the limits of
Probably 3 minutes left.
So there's a reason for the first of and it's, I find it a bit problematic, but I also think it's a necessary evil. I think it's something that Ope alluded to. If you don't have the adequate legal framework that incentivizes appropriately, and these things will happen, because obviously there needs to be a trust regime that is adequate for what you're trying to achieve. So if you start to engage with foreign investors, even some local investors, the first thing you're thinking is, how easy would it be to get justice in the case of bad action? And if they don't think they can get that justice in this jurisdiction, then yeah, the deal is going nowhere. So it's a non-starter. So these things are obviously, a big concern. So a lot of these companies don't actually grow and then go register abroad. From the foundation, they already have a foreign holdco.
Yes.
And when they're talking to investors and engaging with investors, it's just assumed it's a natural evolution. Put natural inputs. And so coming back to, the broader topic, which is around obstacles for founders. I want to say, and I want to tie or emphasize a few points. So there's this reality that we've just discussed. There's the fact that a lot of the obstacles come in different forms. Some are direct, some are indirect. And at the end of the day, this line of conversations are critical for us to really begin to, think about what can be done using the lessons of now to build for the future. So in the past, we've had a startup deal in a few countries, and that has been, going around several countries. We have a lot of countries now already becoming more open to creating one. But we have to look at what has happened. Few countries that have created startup deals have not operationalized it. It's look at Senegal, even Nigeria. So it's been a whole lot of delays. It's been a whole lot of, and within those deals, there are provisions that can actually take care of some of the points that we're discussing now. So I guess we need to look at things from that level and begin to really attack or attempt to solve these challenges that we've talked about, because challenges to founders are not just these things that they face, right? The very structure, the very design of the ecosystem in itself could become an obstacle for the founder as he's progressing, and that's how we have to think about it.
Let's just listen and go back to Osahon again. So for our third question there, Osahon, as a founder, again, a person that's looking to grow the business further, very interested to maybe get your thoughts on the obstacles that Cash on Rail, Scout has faced in the past, and also just what you expect to see in terms of investors and policymakers making changes and decisions to maybe overcome them.
Thank you very much, TJ. So I think the obstacles, there are several obstacles that I think one of the issue is in the African landscape when it comes to startups and businesses is the obstacles are way much bigger than the incentives, and most of these obstacles are infrastructural. And besides economic infrastructure, we're talking about cultural infrastructure as well, scaling down to how the people think. So one of the biggest obstacles I think that we're having is a lack of education itself. A lot of founders do not have the right education in terms of how they need to build their businesses and scale them. Every average Nigerian is entrepreneurial. If you go to Instagram, the average Nigerian has CEO fashion, CEO, beauty. So we need to let people understand that running a business doesn't start from opening an Instagram account or setting up a website or taking the title CEO, right? So people need to understand what they need to do. There's a lot of work that needs to be done educating people, right? If you're building a platform, market research, user experience research, right? Researching your competitors, tools that they need. That is a huge problem in Africa, in Nigeria, everywhere, right? And that access to these materials you can find them easily online, right? But people need to be taught how to even look for these materials, right? And again, you see, there's also the problem with policy. So in Africa, I don't think we have a policy issue in terms of there are no policies in place, but I think we have a problem with how these policies are rolled out, right? We have this approach where we use like an overhaul approach to policies, and we just release policies that are very, very, I don't know, they become bloated because you are not able to implement them. So a phased approach to policies, right? Policies are not just policies that are backed up, not just paper policies or a very well exhausted agenda, but backed up with funds as well. And these funds actually will be used for the purpose for which they were created.